welcome to Crank It Up. I'm Jim Price, and today I want to talk about Bandit rule number 2, the 5-card identity. I know for a fact that I've talked about this rule before because someone recently quoted this rule just days after he let me down severely, that a faction's leader and its 2 double features should give a clear picture of a faction's identity. Obviously, this rule isn't always possible for factions that abandon the traditional slotting system, but the general intent is to have these 5 cards offer a snapshot into what a faction wants to do. This is a complicated rule in practice because this does not guarantee balance. There are factions that follow it and are bad, and factions that are good despite not following it. But I will argue that it is crucial that this rule be followed whenever possible because problems arise if you don't. And even when you do follow it, you have a chance to look at that identity and see if you even like it. As usual, it's easiest to start with the core set, when the game hadn't developed any context or building blocks. The dinosaurs have King Rex, Augmentation, and Howl. This conveys an identity of power, which is certainly accurate, but Howl stands out because it implies a swarm context, yet the dinosaurs don't have one. This clearly indicates a problem, but it also shows that at least 4 cards are terminal actions, which is another problem. And this is another factor of the rule. It gives you a sense of what cards you are most likely to see, and when they compete with one another, that can be an issue. Some factions can overcome it, but in the case of dinosaurs, it proves to be a real issue, especially since one of them doesn't pass rule number 1. But looking at the tricksters, we can see that the rule isn't followed either, and we know tricksters definitely have problems. Set aside your preconceived notions of them. If you look at just Leprechaun, Enshrouding Mist, and Disenchant, what would you think that this faction does? And is this in any way reflected in what they do? It isn't. While tricksters have many problems beyond this, I do believe that they start with a clear lack of a game plan, which stems from lacking a clear identity. Sometimes a faction will hide the fact that it isn't driven by their leader. We see this with both aliens and pirates. Overall, pirates do a good job action-wise of conveying their identity, and Pirate King would certainly reinforce the idea of movement and specials, but the first mate is clearly the standout card. With aliens, you see a clear picture of a stall faction, which is true, but completely overlooks the fact that invaders play a key role in aliens. I think the alien identity is still okay, as having the invader be a leader could be crippling. It's worth noting that this rule is meant to be a snapshot, not the full picture, because there are 15 other cards to consider after all. One of the really useful aspects of the rule, in terms of testing identity, is when you actually remove a card from the 5-card set. Yes, we're talking about vampires again. The double feature Crack of Dusk implies that vampires would play minions from the discard. In fact, since it is power 2 or less, you might think that there are a few minions of power 2 or less in the deck, or at least good ones you'd want to play with the card. But if you remove Crack of Dusk, the vampires have no minion recursion at all. So it isn't part of their identity because it isn't even fleshed out in their deck. Even just looking at Dinner Date, single power 2 destruction is not good, especially since it's technically landlocked, unlike a card like Skillet. Had the rule existed back then, maybe things would have been different for vampires, because a quick glance at those 5 cards yields some very severe problems, and we haven't even gotten yet to the count. For a faction alike that doesn't follow the rule, we have to look at Shapeshifters. I consider this to be a great faction, consistently in my top 10, but they aren't without their problems. Doppelganger and Transmogrify clearly fit in the identity, but Genetic Shift stands out. This is the same problem as Howl, in that it implies a swarm context, even though Genetic Shift is nice enough to have a +3 floor. But how often does the +1 for all get used for them? The Shapeshifters do have extra plays, but they usually come in the form of destruction and replacement. This makes it hard to play them in the same turn, where you are just seeding power like crazy otherwise. There are ways to make Genetic Shift work in the Shapeshifter context, but Mitosis could potentially have been a better double feature. For a faction that follows the rule, but the rule couldn't save them, we have to look at Grannies. Between Granny's Purse, Attic Treasures, and Matriarch, that's a pretty great summary of what Grannies do. The issue is, that's not a particularly useful game plan. Attic Treasures forces you to sift 3 cards, with the expectation that Matriarch can draw back the minions, making this play a convoluted draw 2. Granny's Purse has you ask the question about Rule 1. What am I playing? And there aren't many good options, so once again Rule 2 forces you to look at Rule 1, which can highlight problems early. One of the biggest offenders of this rule is in the same set, Teddy Bears. What do Teddy Bears do? The consensus on the Smash Up Discord is that Teddy Bears are swarm support, not swarm themselves. They have a leader who can play extra minions, a double feature that plays extra minions, and Cuddle. And of the 3, I actually think Cuddle gives the best indication of teddy bears given their antagonistic nature. It's more indicative of Love Overload and Bear Picnic. But looking at the rule again, do the teddy bears have the extra plays that make sense? No. In fact, I think they have too many extra plays for their own good in a self-context, and it betrays the identity that you want the teddy bears to have. There aren't as many violations in a modern context, but we could find one as recently as the ancient Egyptians. Pharaoh obviously makes sense as the leader, giving you an incentive to bury cards and a last-minute uncovering. Tomb Trap might make sense as a double feature, as the threat card to uncover with Pharaoh, even though the Phase 1 uncovering, in my opinion, works against what AE wants. But Ancient Curse really works against the AE strategy, but even worse, it takes up precious room in their deck, making it very hard to bury or uncover. Seal the Tomb should definitely have been the double feature to really solidify burying. Some might think that Ancient Curse is necessary to facilitate destruction with Tomb Trap, but I disagree. It's a ton of work to try to remove someone when AE is slow already, and it ultimately leads players down a bad path. I enjoy Ancient Egyptians a lot, but it's a faction that many players freely admit that they don't understand. And that's a shame. Simply swapping out a double feature would make them much more interesting, and with a state machine like burying, you really need to make it be as flexible as possible. It's possible to have a clear identity that stretches in two directions, all expressed within 5 cards. Unsurprisingly, it's my favorite faction that does this best, Rockstars. Think of what the Rockstars convey with theirs: drawing groupies, playing groupies, and bases 21 or higher. This perfectly sums up what the Rockstars want to do, playing many minions on the biggest bases. As crazy as it sounds, there is a particular action that consistently breaks this rule, the same action type, and it's appeared in all 4 big box sets, the Seeing Stars type. I think this card fits best in the ninja context, but it's hard because too much destruction is bad, and if you give a faction an identity of destruction, it needs to make it count. While Infiltrate is certainly an odd choice for a double feature, it doesn't give the ninjas a reason to destroy things like sharks do. The next faction with the Seeing Stars type is Mages, and this is an odd fit because there isn't really a benefit to discarding a card like Beauty and the Beast, and 3 power isn't that high of a destruction kill. It works against the mage identity because you are likely playing with a lesser hand size, so why wouldn't you use someone's power against them? I don't particularly play mages for the solo unless I know I can do it efficiently. The next person who has it is Masters of Evil, and I've spoken enough on them to indicate why this is a bad fit for a double feature. But we also see this ability in Mulan, and I'm not sure why they have it either, other than the fact that there is an unwritten rule somewhere that this type of ability should always exist as a double feature, and Mulan was the only faction left. I think that this type of ability, the generic slowdown, should serve as a warning because unless your faction has a way to benefit from the destruction, you are weakening its overall game plan as a result. I cannot recall the last time I've even played Zap, but I play Seeing Stars because I don't know what other ninja actions to play. While it's not easy to say what should be the double features in these factions because I make other changes to compensate, I want the ninjas to be built around having a second disguise, mages to have a second speed reading, Mulan to have a second spoiler, and Masters of Evil to change literally everything. If you notice, the faction that does destruction best, in my opinion, Sharks, doesn't have destruction in either of its double features. In the interest of time, I want to give a few more shoutouts to factions that follow the rules well. Cyborg Apes, Giant Ants, Halflings, Anansi, technically superheroes, ignobles, explorers, truckers, sumo, and though I hate to admit it, Polynesian voyagers. Although I do want to point out that Sun Tattoo requires no other actions, yet Shark Tattoo is a double feature designed to give you power counters, the very type of minion you'd like to save, and that's certainly questionable. I think this rule is really important, and it's something that I know I've stressed on the sets I've playtested, and hopefully other playtesters are taking up the cause. Do you agree with this rule? If so, which factions come to mind for what obeys or disobeys it? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Let's shut it down.